Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into another really interesting set of sources you've sent over.
Yes, this time looking at social influence and persuasion.
Exactly, these sort of hidden forces that shape so much of how we think and act.
From, big societal changes right down to the choices you make every day.
We've got quite a mix of articles, some research papers here.
And the goal really is to unpack the core ideas, figure out how influence works, why it works.
Look at the different techniques people use, and maybe most importantly, how you can spot them and, well, resist them if you need to.
It's about giving you the tools, really. A kind of toolkit for navigating this stuff.
Because it's often surprising, isn't it? The psychology behind it all. It's definitely more complex than just someone telling you what to do.
Oh, absolutely. So let's get started. Where do we begin? Maybe with defining what social influence actually is.
Good idea. The sources kick off with some really powerful examples, actually, almost contrasting ones.
They do, like the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital.
Right. The speed that came together was, well, remarkable. It went from Mandela's vision to this huge billion-rand facility.
Funded by so many people, companies, globally too, a massive positive example of an idea influencing action.
An idea inspiring people to give, to build something huge.
But then you have the other side, like the case of Terence Kelly or Khalid Terry,
Yeah, that's a really stark, tragic story.
where an extremist ideology didn't just influence him, it completely changed his life's path, leading to, radical actions and ultimately his death.
So you've got these incredibly different outcomes.
But both stemming from the power of ideas to influence. What does that tell us?
Well, it seems to point to something fundamental about us, doesn't it?
That we're social creatures, deeply social. We depend on each other.
Constantly looking for cues, for information, for guidance.
Exactly. And that reliance, that interdependence, it creates the perfect ground for influence to happen, often non-aggressively.
Right, because forcing people usually just creates pushback.
Cultures tend to discourage outright aggression anyway. So these more subtle methods evolve. And the sources identify two main drivers based on core human needs.
Okay, what are they?
The first one taps into our need to belong. It's called normative influence.
Normative.
Yeah.
So going along with the crowd to be liked, to fit in.
Precisely. You want to be accepted. You don't want to stand out in a bad way.
The classic example here has to be the Solomon Asch studies, right? With the lines.
Yeah. Judging line lengths seems simple.
But when everyone else is giving the wrong answer.
A surprising number of people just went along with it, even when they clearly knew it was wrong.
Which just shows the power of that social pressure.
Immense power. It leads to what's called public compliance.
Public compliance, meaning you say it, you act like you agree.
But privately, you don't buy it at all.
And things like group size matter, right? Up to a point.
Yes, and having even just one other person disagreeing, even if they're also wrong, makes a huge difference. It breaks the unanimity.
Takes the pressure off.
The fear of rejection is real. That Johnny Rocco study they mention, where the group literally voted out the deviant.
Ostracized for not conforming. That's a high price.
It really is. So that's normative influence driven by wanting to be liked.
Okay, what's the second main type then?
The second type is driven by our need to be right. It's informational influence.
Informational. So this is when you go along because you think the others actually know better than you.
Exactly. You use the group as a source of information, especially when you're unsure yourself.
This makes me think of the Muzaffar Sharif study, the one with the dot of light in the dark room, the autokinetic effect.
Right. Alone, people's estimates of how much the light moved were all over the map.
But put them together.
And their estimates started to converge. They formed a group norm.
And the key difference here, compared to Ash, is that people seem to actually believe the group's answer.
Yes, that's the crucial point. Informational influence leads to private acceptance, a real internal change in belief.
Not just saying it, but actually thinking it's correct.
It happens most often in ambiguous situations you just don't know what to do, or in crises where you don't have time to figure things out alone.
Which can sometimes lead to that weird phenomenon. Pluralistic ignorance.
Ah, yes, where everyone's looking at everyone else's, assuming they know what's going on.
But actually, nobody knows anything. Everyone's just guessing based on others' inaction.
A perfect storm for informational influence,
Yeah.
or inaction sometimes. So we have these two drives. Wanting to be liked, normative, leading to public compliance.
And wanting to be right, informational, leading to private acceptance. Got it.
Understanding those is fundamental. Now, how do people actually leverage these drives?
This is where we get into the specific techniques. The sources group them under four main psychological principles.
Right. And the first one is all about our deep, sometimes irrational need to appear consistent, commitment and consistency.
Once we've committed to something, even something small,
We feel this strong pressure, both internal and external, to stick with it, to act in line with that commitment.
it's like building a box around yourself.
Yeah. And then feeling you have to stay inside it. Influencers know this. Think foot in the door.
Start small, then go big.
Exactly. Ask for a tiny favor first, like that study asking housewives a few questions about products.
And then later, asking if a whole survey team could come rummage through their cupboards for hours.
The ones who agreed to the small request first were way more likely to agree to the big one later.
Because saying no would feel inconsistent with their initial helpfulness.
Precisely. Then you have the lowball technique.
Get agreement first, then reveal the hidden costs.
Yep. Agree on a car price, then suddenly there are extra fees. Or that student study, get them to agree to participate before telling them it's at 7 a.m.
And more people showed up than if they knew the time up front. The commitment grows its own legs, as the source says.
You start justifying the decision internally, so even when the original reason, the low price, the convenient time changes, you stay committed.
It makes the original terms almost irrelevant.
Very similar, but maybe shadier, is bait and switch.
Advertise something amazing that isn't actually available.
And when the customer shows up, already psychologically committed to buying something, you switch them to a different, usually a less attractive offer.
Yeah, that feels like it's crossing a line into deceptive practices.
It often does. Then there's labeling. This one's a bit more subtle.
Assigning a positive trait to someone.
Right. You seem like a really kind person, or you look like someone who cares about X, and then you make a request consistent with that label.
And people want to live up to that positive image.
Especially if it connects to their self-concept. Studies showed it worked with kids' writing, adults' voting likelihood. It plays on the self-fulfilling prophecy.
There was also that bit about asking for money. The even a cent will help thing.
Oh, yes. That's a clever use of consistency.
Why does it work so well?
Because saying no to even a cent makes you feel incredibly stingy, inconsistent with being a reasonable, maybe even generous person.
So you feel obliged to give something.
Exactly. But once you've decided to give, you usually give a normal amount, not literally a cent, so it dramatically increases the number of donors.
Okay, so how do you fight back against this consistency pressure?
The main defense is to pause. Ask yourself, knowing what I know now about the extra costs, the real timing, the switch, would I still make this commitment?
Separate the initial decision from the current reality.
Exactly. Don't feel trapped by that first step. Also, being publicly committed to your own values can make you less susceptible.
Makes sense. Okay, principle number 2, reciprocation.
The obligation to give back when you receive. It's fundamental to human society. The sources even mention Ubuntu here.
A cornerstone of social life. So how is it exploited?
A classic is the door-in-the-face technique.
Start with a ridiculously large request. They'll refuse.
And then retreat to a smaller request, the one you actually wanted.
Like asking for a 4-hour class, getting rejected, then saying, okay, how about just 2 hours?
Your retreat seems like a concession, so they feel obligated to reciprocate your compromise by agreeing to the smaller request.
The volunteering study, too, ask for 2 years, then retreat to 2 hours.
Huge increase in agreement for the 2 hours after refusing the 2 years. It needs the first request to be large but not totally absurd, and the same person has to make both requests.
So it feels like a personal concession.
Right. Then there's the that's not all technique, often seen in infomercials.
But wait, there's more.
Exactly. You make an offer, but before the person can respond, you sweeten the pot, add a bonus, drop the price.
Like the cupcake study. Offer it for $1.25, then immediately say, actually, today, just $1.
More people bought it that way than when it was just offered for $1 straight up. The immediate discount feels like a personal favor you need to reciprocate by buying.
It feels like they're doing you a special deal. How do you defend against reciprocity tactics?
Cialdini's advice, mentioned in the sources, is good. Accept initial favors or concessions in good faith. But if you realize it's a manipulation,
A compliance trick.
then mentally reframe it. It's not a genuine gift or concession anymore, it's a tactic. And you're under no obligation to reciprocate a trick.
Distinguish kindness from manipulation.
Got it.
Principle 3.
Scarcity. Things that are rare or limited seem more valuable.
The limited edition effect. If it's hard to get, we want it more.
Yep. Think droughts making water precious, or the value of gold and diamonds. It works partly because scarcity implies quality or competition.
And it triggers that feeling.
Well-
Psychological reactance.
Right. When our freedom to have something is threatened by its scarcity, we react by wanting it even more to assert our freedom.
So techniques like limited number, only 5 left, or fast approaching deadline, sale ends tonight, play directly on this.
Creates urgency, fear of missing out, FOMO. Think Black Friday.
That's pure scarcity pressure. How do you resist that urge?
2 steps. First, recognize the feeling, that emotional rush, the slight panic. Use it as a cue to stop, slow down, breathe.
Let the rational brain catch up.
Second, ask why you want the item. Is it because of its actual features and benefits, or is it mainly because it's scarce? Separate the utility from the rarity.
Focus on need, not just availability. Okay, final principle, capturing and disrupting attention.
This one relates directly to how our minds process information, the duplex mind idea again.
So grab attention for strong arguments, distract for weak ones.
Basically, yes. The peak technique is about capturing attention. Make an unusual request.
Like asking for 17 cents instead of spare change.
Exactly. Or that weird speed limit, 23 kph. It's odd. It breaks through the automatic refusal script, makes people pause and actually process the request for a moment.
Opens a tiny window. And the other side is disrupting attention.
Disrupt, then reframe. Introduce something confusing or unexpected to momentarily scramble their thinking.
And then immediately follow up with a positive spin or the actual request.
Like the Christmas card example. They're 300 cents, which is a bargain. The 300 cents is disruptive, the bargain is the positive reframe.
Or that Operation Smile campaign using distracting images before asking for donations.
The disruption bypasses the deliberate analytical mind, leaving the automatic system more open to the positive suggestion or reframe.
So how do you counter these attention tricks?
For peak, just consciously take that moment it creates to actually think about the request, don't just react. For disrupt, then reframe, try to consciously filter out the disruption and focus solely on the merits of the actual offer or message being reframed.
Okay, so those are the 4 core principles behind many techniques. Now, shifting slightly to persuasion itself, trying to change attitudes, the sources bring up that classic who says what to whom model.
Right. Echoing Hovland and even Aristotle way back, it breaks down persuasion into the source, the message, and the audience.
Let's start with the who, the source. What makes someone persuasive?
2 big things, credibility and likability.
Credibility comes down to expertise and trustworthiness.
Exactly. Do they know what they're talking about? Expertise. And will they tell the truth, honestly? Trustworthiness.
Brad Pitt on movies, credible. Brad Pitt on geopolitics, less so. The Costa Concordia captain.
Has 0 trustworthiness on safety, regardless of his technical knowledge.
That Hovland and Weiss study on Oppenheimer versus Pravda about atomic subs was fascinating. High credibility wins initially.
But then the sleeper effect kicks in. Weeks later, people remembered the message but forgot who said it. So the low credibility source's message gained impact, while the high credibility one faded.
The message gets detached from the messenger, although the sources say that effect isn't always perfectly reliable.
True, it's debated, but it highlights the interplay. We also see credibility in trust towards professions, doctors high, politicians low in that SA data.
And expertise is often perceived as trustworthiness. What about covert communicators, like ex-smokers arguing against smoking?
They can be incredibly persuasive. Why? They have credibility, been there, done that. They show commitment by arguing against their past. They're often relatable, similarity, and they demonstrate mastery.
They embody the change. The sources also noted powerless speech hedging disclaimers hurts credibility.
Right. And then there's that interesting trade-off with talking speed.
Faster talking makes you seem smarter, more credible.
Often, yes, but the research shows it's nuanced. Fast talking helps weak arguments. People don't have time to pick them apart.
But it hurts strong arguments, because people can't fully process how good they are.
Exactly. So auctioneers talk fast for a reason. It prevents deep thought.
Okay, what about likability?
Simple. We're more persuaded by people we like. 2 key factors are similarity, we like people like us, and physical attractiveness.
The halo effect. We assume attractive people have other good qualities too. Big in ads, politics.
Definitely. Now onto the audience. Says what the message itself.
Reason versus emotion. Logic or feelings.
Depends on the audience. Analytical types respond more to logic, others more to emotion. And being in a good mood helps remember the peanuts and soft drinks study.
Feed them first. What about humor? It's everywhere in ads.
Catches attention, increases liking. But the downside, you might remember the joke, not the product.
And cultural differences matter. The source mentioned humor is less effective in many African contexts compared to the West. real-life scenarios resonate more.
And sex in ads apparently bombs globally.
Interesting. What about fear appeals?
They can work, but it's a balancing act. You need moderate fear enough to motivate, but not paralyze. And crucially, you must offer a clear solution.
Like stop smoking ads showing graphic images and giving quit line numbers.
Exactly. Without a clear out, people just shut down or deny the risk. Like that AIDS study where fear appeals backfired on those already at risk but worked on virgins who felt they could take action.
So fear plus efficacy. What about presenting one side versus both sides of an argument?
One-sided works best if the audience isn't very analytical or already agrees. Two-sided acknowledging and refuting counter-arguments is better for more knowledgeable audiences, or if they're likely to hear the other side later. Shows you're aware.
Like in politics, with negative campaigning. The sources say results are mixed on whether it truly works.
Yeah, it can hurt both candidates, lower turnout, or be a desperation tactic. Sometimes the goal is just to get the other candidate's potential voters to stay home.
And finally, repetition. Does just hearing something over and over work?
It leverages the mere exposure effect. Familiarity breeds liking, generally. Unless you already disliked it, then repetition makes it worse.
Okay.
And too much leads to advertisement wear out.
Like parental nagging. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have the source, the message. Now, to whom? The audience.
This is critical because audience characteristics determine how a message is processed, which brings us back to the duplex mind and the two routes to persuasion.
Right, the elaboration likelihood model, ELM, or heuristic systematic model. Central versus peripheral routes.
The central route is conscious, deliberate thinking, analyzing the arguments.
And that requires both motivation,
Mhm.
is it relevant to me, do I enjoy thinking, and ability, am I distracted, do I have the knowledge?
If you have both, persuasion depends on argument quality. Strong arguments persuade, weak ones get rejected or counter-argued.
And this leads to strong, lasting attitude change.
Very durable, predicts behavior well. The peripheral route, on the other hand, is automatic.
When you're not motivated or able to think deeply.
You rely on shortcuts, peripheral cues, expert said so, lots of arguments, it's expensive, they're attractive,
Surface level stuff.
leads to weak, temporary attitude change, easily swayed later.
So the same message could work on different people for totally different reasons.
Absolutely. And audience treats influence the route, need for cognition, self-monitoring.
Like the peanut butter study, high self-monitors liking the brand name more, even if it's identical. Image matters more to them.
Cultural differences, again, individualist versus collectivist, appeals working better in different places.
And overheard messages being sneakily effective because your guard isn't up.
You don't see it as a persuasion attempt.
And distraction helping weak arguments but hurting strong ones.
It all ties back to whether you engage that effortful central processing.
Okay, this feels like a lot of ways we can be influenced. But the good news is we can resist, right?
Definitely. We're not just passive recipients. The sources offer clear strategies.
Like attitude inoculation. Sounds like a vaccine.
It kind of is. You expose yourself to weak versions of arguments against your beliefs.
And figuring out how to counter those weak attacks.
Builds up your defenses, making you more resistant when a stronger attack comes along, like McGuire showed with health messages or inoculating teens against smoking pressure.
Strengthens the attitude. What else?
Forewarned is forearmed. Just knowing someone is about to try and persuade you helps you prepare.
Like those teens warned about the anti-driving speech. The more warning, the less persuasion.
Because it triggers psychological reactance, that feeling of, don't tell me what to think, when your freedom feels threatened.
Which can even cause a boomerang effect, doing the exact opposite. Romeo and Juliet syndrome.
Exactly. And finally, a basic point. Use all your resources. Be rested. Be focused.
Being tired makes you more gullible.
Basically, yes. Critical thinking takes energy. Being sleep-deprived makes it harder to evaluate information properly, easier to just accept things.
So basic self-care is a form of defense.
In a way, yes. This whole discussion really underscores what's unique about human influence.
Our duplex mind, the central and peripheral routes, that's very human.
Our elaborate self-concepts that labeling plays on, the complex social norms like reciprocity.
Maybe even our capacity for guilt. And the difference between private acceptance and public compliance, the inner versus outer world.
Humor as a tool, and crucially, our capacity for conscious resistance. using reason and self-awareness,
We can step back and analyze it.
which is both why we're susceptible to complex influence and why we have the unique capacity to understand and resist it.
This has been fascinating, really pulling together all these different strands.
Hopefully it gives you, our listener, a clearer picture of all the forces trying to nudge you one way or another every day.
So the big takeaway, influence works through our needs fitting in, being right. It uses techniques based on commitment, reciprocity, scarcity, attention, and it targets either your thinking mind or your automatic reactions.
And knowing how it works, understanding those mechanisms, that's your first line of defense. It helps you spot the techniques and use things like inoculation, forewarning, and just plain critical thinking.
So maybe a final thought for you to ponder. As you move through your world, think about where you see these principles most powerfully at play. Not just in ads or politics, but in shaping group dynamics, public opinion, maybe even bigger societal shifts. Where is influence being directed right now, and what might that tell us about where things are heading?